Former Christie allies Bill Baroni and Bridgegate receiving their sentences for their roles in Bridgegate. Our legal panel here to discuss whether justice was served and is this the last time we're hearing of the GW Bridge Lane closure scandal? Then the question, can fake news cause very real legal problems for the people writing and spreading what turns out to be unadulterated lies? Also, Trump administration threatened to crack down on sanctuary cities, but what can the feds actually do if the local police will not cooperate with them? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. A busy hour ahead. We begin this evening, though, with the sentencing in the Bridgegate trial. Former Port Authority official Bill Baroni, he got 24 months in federal prison, and former top Christie aide Bridgegate, she got 18 months. Each was convicted of several counts, including conspiracy and fraud. Now, they were behind that scheme, of course, that shut lanes down on the George Washington Bridge back in September of 2013. And they did it, as we know, to punish the Democratic mayor of Fort Lee because he had the temerity of not endorsing Governor Christie's re-election campaign. Christie wound up winning by a landslide anyway. Here's Baroni's attorney speaking right after the sentencing.
Everyone would like Bill to make comments today, but on advice of lawyers, us, we've told them not to do so. And that's because, as you know, we plan to appeal several aspects of this matter.
Now take a listen to Bridgegate.
Today has been obviously a very difficult day for me and for my children, but I want to assure my kids and everyone else that this fight is far from over. I will not allow myself to be the scapegoat in this case, and I look very much forward to the appeal.
All right, so those were the defendants. How about the prosecutor? U.S. Attorney William Fitzgerald, he said this.
This was an extremely difficult case to sentence. I thought the judge did an outstanding job balancing the aggravating factors and the mitigating factors. The aggravating factors obviously were that Mr. Baroni and Ms. Kelly used their positions in the government, used government resources to settle a petty political score.
All right, a lot to chew over here. Let's bring in our legal panel. Doug Von Oist, a founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Amy Darashian, attorney, legal analyst, and Emmy award-winning journalist. Mark Furnish does not have an Emmy. No, he's an adjunct professor at the Elizabeth House School of Law at Pace University. He's also argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. Guys, Amy, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, Doug, first thing. We saw, obviously, the statement from the attorney for Baroni, but then Bridgegate herself. Am I reading too much into it where she says, not only will I not go quietly, there'll be an appeal, but I will not be made the scapegoat for this? Could somebody flip after a verdict and become a cooperating witness after they're convicted? I know usually it happens before sentencing so that it's a mitigating factor in what they get or not. But can you do it after the fact?
They certainly could try. You can cooperate at any time to change your sentencing. And, but they are sentenced at this point. The question is whether they would actually want them to do. You know, Mark's a bit of an expert at the sentencing part of this.
Yeah, certainly there's under the federal rules of criminal procedure, there's something called a Rule 35 motion that enables them to roll and testify against somebody else after trial and after conviction and get credit for it. And
am I right when what I heard there from Ms. Kelly?
You know, she's saying that the fight is far from over, so I didn't take that
and
as
I won't be made the scapegoat here?
Well, unfortunately, being the scapegoat is not a defense if you did something wrong, unless, you know, you're in Nuremberg, they tried that.
But she's clearly not the scapegoat. I mean, the mayor sent them an email saying that school buses can't get through, that ambulances can't get through. And she was laughing about it and making a joke about it, and people could have died. So how is she the scapegoat? She was very much a part of this.
And her other compatriot there, Time for a Little Traffic on the GW, they said it all, but...
Ho, ho, ho.
Exactly.
Well, that works very well with Christie, the ho, ho, ho.
Well,
you know, I didn't want to make the joke. I mean, the specter of Christie was sort of hovering over the whole trial,
absolutely.
And this just perpetuates that to the extent he can hover over anything.
But he got his just fruits because it destroyed his chances of being president.
Did we get the punctuation? Was today the punctuation, Amy? Or let's leave aside if there's an appeal or not. Were these two at the end of the day the only ones who paid at least a legal price of 18 and 24 months behind bars?
So far, yeah, but they were the ones that were dumb enough to put all this stuff in writing, and obviously, if he did know anything about it, he protected himself. So I guess that so far, the government doesn't feel that the testimony of these three people who were part of the plan against him is enough.
Look, if they had a smoking gun against Christie, you would think that they would have
right?
rolled beforehand, because
yeah.
obviously Christie is the juicier target in every respect than these two, so it didn't go that way. So you would think that they're using this for strategic advantage. As we talked about when the trial unfolded, it was in the interest of both sides, the prosecution and the defense, to have the specter of Christie sort of hanging out there and being the elephant who was not in the room, as it were, literally and figuratively.
Surprised by the sentence, Doug? 18 and 24 months. You know, I remember we've talked with a lot of people on the subject over the last year plus here, and some people said, well, it's going to be hard getting a conviction. Everybody knows they were idiots and they put it in an email, but at the end of the time, defining what the crime was and then getting a conviction for it, when a lot of people thought they wouldn't have acted alone, that some other people, that either a culture was created where this was acceptable or not. Nonetheless, you surprised, A, they got sentenced, they're going behind bars, and not for a couple months here, for a year and a half and 2 years, in addition to community service.
I'm not surprised at all, because now at this time, the jury has spoken. They're guilty of these crimes. And if you look at what they actually did, and if you look at the scope of what they did, it's really pretty egregious. So, you know, that seems like a lot of time, but now we're talking about two people who've been convicted after a jury trial. It's not long at all.
And one of the issues which is really interesting is there was this question whether an intentional traffic jam infringes on the constitutional rights of people to move freely. And since there wasn't any type of compelling government interest to create this, and it was done for calculating and cold and as a vendetta basically, they infringed upon the constitutional rights of all of the people of the state and all the people that were passing through at the time.
Just as a fact, everybody, before you think of this as, you know, petty gotchas and everything else, maybe that's how it started. There was reports not just of dislocation. This was targeted to happen first week of school, targeted to happen at the time it did, also, I believe in High Holy Days or whatever else, but on top of that also, there was an ambulance where a person died in transit. It turned out they would have died had there not been traffic, but I mean, that was a fortunate happenstance. Not unfortunate the person died, but it could have been really bad, Mark.
Look, I'm not a fan of Christie and that administration, but it's instructive when the acting U.S. attorney comes out and says and uses the loaded phrase petty political crime. I think it sort of thou doth protest a little bit too much. At the end of the day, I thought it was a lot of time for what they were convicted of having done.
If the dummies didn't put it in an email, right? If the dummies didn't have the email thread, would they still have been convicted?
It cost the taxpayers all of $14,000. So that's a lot of time. And when you consider that David Sampson, even though he cooperated in a related investigation, this is the business with the air traffic, the flights to South Carolina.
Flight, yes.
He got nothing, zero, zip,
but they
zilch,
have to make
nada.
an example out of them. You can't use taxpayer money to hatch an evil plot.
No, I got it. 14 grand. I mean, it's a lot of time. And you know, you can't have two standards of justice, one for poor people and one for the rich and privileged politicians. It's still a lot of time for what this crime was, in my view. It's not a shocking or exorbitant amount of time, but it's pretty substantial for what this was. A petty political crime, as he described it.
And I think, as Mark said it, if they had something on Christie, and I think it would have come up, and clearly people believe, and I believe myself, that this didn't happen in a vacuum. There was a culture that was created and perpetuated. There were conversations that took place, that anyone didn't get on board. And the idea that from an opposition party, that if a mayor had the temerity not to endorse you, that you were going to like exact, in this case, creating a nightmare for the guy at the worst time and all the people in his constituencies. I can't believe that happened out of thin air. And maybe, just maybe, Bridget Kelly is hinting that there could be more to come, but I think Mark's right. If it hadn't come out yet, it doesn't seem like it will.
Rich, you've got to make an example out of these people. I agree with Amy, but you think about what this prosecution must have cost. It's not to say that it wasn't worth doing, but it cost multiples of the $14,000 loss that the people of New Jersey sustained. So worth thinking
And
about.
don't forget, then there was all the money wasted on the Randy Mastro fraud of a report that came out, and all the things. And it also certainly destroyed a political career. When you look at Christie, I think people forget after winning and winning by the margin he did. There was a lot of other problems that he had, but this was the beginning, middle, and arguably the end.
But like you said, there had to have been a culture created, and he had to have played a part in it, because how would there be so many people on board within his administration?
And acting with seemingly a glee here at what they were doing. All right, coming up next.
That's characteristic of him, though.
Can the people pushing fake news wind up in trouble with the law? Never has that question been more appropriate than nowadays. Where is the line between free speech and libel? We'll get into that after this.